Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of GOW, the Generation Wrestling Podcast. As always, it's yours truly, the 29-year-old piece of gold, the franchise, aka the showstopper, better known as the GOW's resident tribal chief of women. As always, I got my tag team partner, my brother, my family. He is the flyest in the room, Mr. 1, 2, 3. Pin that ass down, K Breezy, aka EC's resident Isaac Hayes, King Tuco in the building, bro. What's good?
Man, what's good, man? As we bringing the people a hood report today, man, as we are reporting and we are talking about the women of wrestling. Why are we talking about the women of wrestling? Because it's International Women's Month. And we got to talk about the women in wrestling. We got to give the props to those that have come in and blazed the trail and have left us in awe of what they have done in this great business that we love of this sport of wrestling. So, my bro, go ahead and kick things off, my man.
Absolutely, absolutely. And guys, real quick, so again, happy International Women's Month. I know we are a little bit late, but hey, man, we've had a lot of recording to do this month. Hell, this week we got a lot more even after this. Well, we had to make sure, we show love to all our sisters in the wrestling business, past, present, and future. And with that being said, man, so we really don't have a set format for the show. We're just gonna get on here. We're gonna talk to y'all, talk some favorite memories, and what we like to see, the overall progression in women's wrestling. And yeah, man, we're gonna shed a little bit of light on this, show some love, and do what we do. But with that being said, man, speaking of women's wrestling, right now, all across the board, WWE, AEW, Impact, New Japan, Ring of Honor, ML, everywhere, man. Like a Shine, Shimmer, damn, there's one over in Japan, and I can't think of it right now. Oh my God, Sasha Banks. Mercedes Moné. She wrestles right now. Oh my God. Is it New Japan? Yeah, but it's one more. It's one more, but I can't think about it. But yes, but yo,
I can't think of it either.
But right now, man, women's wrestling is at an all-time high. And you and I, man, we've said this quite a few times actually over the last several years that women's wrestling is crazy. And I don't know, it could be because they don't have as many matches on the card, sometimes if any, honestly, as the men. But we always said, man, it's something about the women where every time they go out, whether it's a good match, bad match, or indifferent, when the women's match, when the women have a good match, it's usually the best match on the card or right up there with one of the best matches on the card, being men or women. Recently we had women main event WrestleManias. We had, women doing Hell in the Cells and a bunch of first ever matches in WWE. Now, we already know that a lot of this stuff was going on the indies, but to see it really being broadcast on a mainstream level and be accepted on a mainstream level, and I want to give Impact Wrestling / TNA definitely got to give them a lot of credit as far as one of the bigger companies in America to really put a light to it, because even back when you had the Divas era, and even back when you had the eras of wrestling where women's wrestling wasn't quite as popular here in the States, Impact Wrestling has always done that consistently, right? And now of course you got some of the best women's wrestlers in the world in Impact Wrestling. Now WWE as well, you got your Charlotte Flairs, you got your Baileys, you got your Becky Lynches, and you go down to NXT, you got a bunch of young upstarts there. You go to AEW, you got homegrown talent like Britt Baker, you got the Chris Statlanders, you got the young bloods and Ty Mello, who've shown what they could do in the ring. We give them the opportunity to Anna James, who's rapidly improving, and then you go on to New Japan, and then you got the Rios of the world and the Kairi Sanes and just so on and so forth, man. But let's break it down, man. As somebody that's been a fan of this sport, much like me, straight out the womb, damn near, ain't no secret. You and I, we got a little bit of age gap on us, but at the same time, we still follow this thing called wrestling closely. And I going on 30 years of life, and most of those being a wrestling fan, I've seen the transition of women's wrestling being treated as a novelty, as a bathroom break. And now to see people wanting to see the women main event, to see the women have more of an important place on the card or higher spot on the card, get into these certain matches and more serious storylines. Bro, as a fan who came in and just been watching from, the late 90s. I mean, excuse me, the late 80s, early 90s, seeing the transition now. How do you feel about that? Because I'm a fan coming in from the mid 90s on, you right before that. So talk to me, man. As a fan of yourself, man, how does it feel now to see the progression of women's wrestling from then to present day?
Well, it's a huge jump. It's a huge leap. It's a Superman, leaping buildings with a single bound. Like it's that. Lonnie, what's going on, bro? It's it's a joy to watch. As far as I can remember, women in wrestling, you had a couple of women who wrestled. You had Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young, but they were before my time. And though, there were maybe one or two little off matches with a celebrity or, somebody that was a part-time, mostly like a manager or a valet, more than a wrestler. But until, really until Medusa came along, was there a woman that I saw that wasn't just someone who looked at pretty and stood on the side. She was actually pretty decent in the ring.
Right.
Problem was she didn't have a lot of competition. There was only so many women's wrestlers at that time, or really being shown at that time. So it was really, you didn't really get a lot. So to have seen her kind of come in, late 80s, early 90s, and then to go through that time frame where there really was no one until you got to about 95. No. Actually, I'm gonna say about 97, 98. You had China, and you had China, she was kind of like that eighth wonder of the world, man. She was that one, a big bulky girl, that woman, not a girl, a woman, excuse me, a big bulky woman that was slapping the shit out of dudes, picking them up and body slamming them and low blowing them and not afraid of them, like intimidating some men. And she did her thing like Medusa. There wasn't much competition for her, but she got to run as a women's champion for a while. But most importantly, she became the first female intercontinental champion. Like that's just how dominating she was, that they ended up they had to put her into something with somebody and do something with her. And it was, and it wasn't like she had the greatest title run ever. She won it, she held it, she defended it, she lost it. Storyline purposes was the reason. It wasn't like she wasn't capable or wasn't over with the fans, because people were excited when she did it. When you move on from that to when you get the Trish Stratus, and she came in, and this is why people feel the way they feel about Trish. When she came into the game, she was not a wrestler. She was a manager. She was eye candy. That's what Trish was. Trish was part of TNA. And no, that did not mean Test and Albert. That's what TNA. That is what TNA meant when Trish Stratus showed up. They just happened to be there. So for her to come from that to be where she was when she finished, like that is the evolution jump and what we were getting in women's wrestling. Because again, I named Medusa. That's late 80s, early 90s. Then I went from there to China. So you kind of, you see what I'm saying? Like there wasn't much of an option. There wasn't much to see because it was not really there. So then by the time we get to the Trish and the Litas and the Molly Hollies and the Ivories and the Jazz and who am I forgetting? Jazz, Tori, Jacqueline, I like when we got to that Victoria, like when we got to that group of women, it was like, that was different because they were trying, they were trying, because a lot of them were a little rough, but again, half of them had to be trained to know how to wrestle. The other half knew how to wrestle, but they just needed to work on some stuff. So it was a work in progress, but fortunately enough, Trish and Lita and a handful of others were able to cultivate and do some things. Mickie James, when she came along, and they were able to, push that thing forward. the fact that, you know, when I think of, you know, one of my best matches that I loved on Monday Night Raw was the Lita versus Trish main event match. Because if you remember their rivalry, man, that was a heated rivalry. That was a rivalry of years. That was the first time you got a female rivalry that lasted that long. Like, you didn't have that. Like, you didn't. So that right there was something that was like, man, if you really put an effort behind it, it can work. And it worked. Hey, it's one of those all-time matches that people remember. And those two, you know, they would always tear their house down. One of them would always leave broken or busted. One of them always left the match bleeding or broke every time. But that's just what they were willing to do to show you that they are capable of doing it. So when I think of those women, and again, when I think of Jazz, and I think of Jacqueline, and I think of others like that were those hard-hitting women that were really, they were down for the cause. They can punk out some men. I wanted to see more of them, but of course we were at a time where, you know, that was kind of frowned upon, but also it was also looked at like it wasn't sexy enough, which brought us to the diva era, which for me, that took us back, because I hated the Barbie doll era. I hated seeing all these pretty models trying to be passed off as great wrestlers when honestly, none of them compared to Trish. None of them compared to Lita. None of them compared to Victoria. Even at that time, when you want to say what Paige came out of there, Natalia came out of there, Michelle McCool came out of that. There was a handful of them that came out of it, but there were the rest of them, man. They were just eye candy to hold the belt and look pretty for Vince McMahon's amusement. But when we got past that, that's when Charlotte and all of them showed up. That's when we saw the evolution and to where we are now.
Yeah, and you know, when you talk about, you know, the diva era, which you also got to realize too, and then when you talk about the matches, you got to put the matches in perspective, because just recently, you know, about a decade or so ago, you know, a woman's match, the only woman's match on the WrestleMania card got cut because of time. Right. And that's a terrible excuse when you look at it now, considering when you look at Vince McMahon, you know, the last 4, 5, 6 years, his WrestleManias have been going absurdly over time now. But, you know, that goes to show just how far we've come, because when you look at the Divas era, you look and you see these matches, a lot of these matches were 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 2-minute matches.
Bra and panty matches. Pillowcase fights, striptease, mud fight matches. It was like there was no real bitch. I'm about to whoop your ass match. Like I wanted, where was those matches?
But you know what? You actually just proved my point. You know, you had women out here. You know, you had women out here playing. You know, duck goose, and you know, playing ring around the rosy and shit like that. And those segments will last 10-15 minutes. You got bikini dance offs and shit that'll last longer than the matches would. Literally, you would dedicate a whole segment that went as long as a main event match would go. You know, but that's because that's what y'all want us to see. Y'all see, Vince would rather put women on TV wrestling in mud for 20 minutes as opposed to letting these women out here actually go out here. Oh no, you can't wrestle for longer than 3 minutes because you can only roll around and pull each other's hair for so much. You can't punch, only men punch. You can't stomp, only men stomp. You know, so
and that was a thing, and that's the sad part. That was the thing, and to think that, you know, that even for that to be a thing, and it's like you got to a point where it's like, man, you know, what even with all those matches, it's like, why couldn't you do it? Like, why would you want to do it? And some of the other women that were actually women wrestlers that had to do those matches that didn't want to do those matches. I know they hated those matches. And it's like, I just want to get out here and just whoop somebody's ass, man. So that's why it's like, bro, and don't get me wrong, as men, that I watched of it, that I liked some of it, I did like it. But at the same time, it got to a point where it was like, it's just the same thing. It's like, you're not doing anything different. Like, all right, I've seen enough half-naked women on the show. Okay, cool. What else can they do? That's where it got to a point. That's one of the reasons why a lot of the women's segments were, you know, bathroom breaks. It was like, well, what else could they do? But a lot of times they didn't teach the women and better guide them and prep them for what they needed to do until it became necessary when certain women became bigger than certain men. When Trish became the way she did, Lita and Molly Holly and others, like you had to put some respect on them and give them their respected times for their matches. Even though, again, some of those women's matches that we did get weren't super long, but some of them actually got respectable time to tell a decent story, to have the good back and forth, and to get a winner out of it. So no, I definitely cringed during the Divas time, but boy, whoo, man, before it and after it, I'm good with it.
Yeah, and you know, and moving forward, you know, getting up out of the Divas era. So, like you say, you know, you got to go through some trials and tribulations because of the Divas era, and people getting tired of seeing the women being mistreated as talent, getting tired of not seeing the women have good matches, even though you can clearly see you had people like Sasha, Bailey, Becky, Charlotte coming up, wrestling, Paige, wrestling, you know, wrestling being the operative word here.
Wrestling.
Natalia, you know what I'm saying? Got to definitely get Natalia. Dude, Natalia is an unsung hero, super undervalued in my opinion to the fans, although I know she's greatly valued by the industry. You know, and then so, you know, in 2015, 2014, 2015, you know, in WWE, you had the fans, you know, super short match, you know, and it was visible on TV like, yo, this match won. Yeah, we get it was a short match, but something just didn't go the way it was supposed to. Like it just didn't work. And that same night, for days, you had Give Divas a Chance trending, and they were adding it. WWE adding Vince McMahon day after day after day, all night. And this is men and women, and this is the rare case of fans actually being heard because so many people were so pissed off at that one specific match. It's like, bro, okay, we sick of this shit. Like, something's got to give. And then right after that, Vince McMahon put out a tweet, or at least somebody tweeted on behalf of Vince McMahon. I hear you. And then the next week after that, you know, you start to see change. Then you got Stephanie McMahon. She comes into the fold now on screen. She starts calling up some of the NXT women. You got the, you know, and then you really see almost immediately a shift being put on the women. Now, things didn't start going great right away. Things still have a long way to go for the women. But that was a rare instance in WWE because, you know, they love to do what they want to do. But at that point, it was like, okay, now we're starting to see the women getting treated as equals as far as athletes and entertainers in the wrestling world. Okay, and then you start seeing, bro, okay, let's talk about it. The Women's Evolution pay-per-view, they only did it one time, and yet that is still one of the most requested pay-per-views to bring back. The fans loved it. Like, bro, you did an all-women's pay-per-view. The matches were fire as hell. Like, the matches were fire as hell.
I got to see Trish Stratus versus Charlotte Flair, bro. I was satisfied. I didn't care that Charlotte won. I was satisfied. Like, yo, I didn't think I would get that.
Not only that, but we talk. Not only that, but we talk about the Divas era. And granted, okay, look. Now, was it kind of a stain in the history of WWE? Sure, but you know, I don't blame the women though. I don't blame the talent because at the end of the day, you can only do what you told. Like the Good Brothers right now. You know, I know this is women, but you know, Carl Anderson and Di Gallows. Dude, I love them as a tag team. When they came back, I'm like, all right, cool. They gonna do something. But guess what? Right now, they're not being used. I can't blame Di Gallows and Carl Anderson. They came back. I'm pretty sure they like, what the fuck? So now when I look at the women back then, it's like, I'm pretty sure they want to wrestle. They understood the assignment. Yeah, we're here to look sexy, but god damn, I at least want to wrestle. But if that ain't what the boss allowing you to do, and he paying you a check, and he tell you go out there and show what you got to show, well, you in the contract. Go ahead. You know, so
do what you do, sir.
but now to see, but then we get this Evolution pay-per-view, and then you get some of the best women from all eras, the Divas era, and then the modern era. And I'm like you said, Charlotte versus Trish and things like that. And you get to see, the leaders come back. At the Royal Rumble 2 years ago, you got to see the Melinas and the Sasha Banks face off in the ring. It's just kind of like, damn, in the alternate reality, like, bro, that match would have been a banger. You get to see the Michelle McCool's come back. You get to see the Beth Phoenix is squaring up with a Bianca Belair, because Beth Phoenix, much like China, Beth Phoenix at a certain point in time, like China, was the only one of her kind. They wasn't building women like that. And now it's damn near become almost a standard, almost a prototype now in WWE or wrestling in general, because you got the Chris Statlanders, you got the Rhea Ripleys, you got the Bianca Belairs, you got the Charlotte Flairs, you got the Sol Rukas. You got these women who are genetically and physically gifted at a time where it was like, yo, strong ain't sexy. Muscle ain't sexy. Then you get the Jade Cargills and stuff like that. And you're like, damn, you can be beautiful and strong and go out here and kick ass doing it. Almost to the fact that you got some of these women who are here looking more legit for a world heavyweight title shot than the actual heavyweights. Because, and so, just to see how fast things have progressed. And we still got a long way. I mean, you got the women over there wrestling and say what you want to say about it. I know the Saudi Arabia pay-per-views get a lot of shit. We've talked our shit about it too, but we can't deny and not underscore the fact that because of the legacy and the brand of WWE, these women were able to go over here and perform. Like, that is a history-making moment in of itself.
And the women of that country got to see them perform, which
exactly. So it's like, okay, circumstances might not have been the best, but at the end of the day, the women are still making leaps and bounds forward. And now one of the most anticipated matches we looking forward to seeing on the card this year, Bianca Belair, her, defending her title against Asuka. We want to see that. That's a highly anticipated match. Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley. Again, out of all the matches on the card, the two women's championship matches are two of the most sought after matches to be seen. And, to go back 10 years ago and that not even be the case to now, it's like, yo, like, what are women at? Okay, we getting women's Hell in the Cell? Bro, imagine in 2006, 2005. Outside of Lita and Trish. Yeah, like, bro, come on.
If it ain't Lita and Trish, I don't see no one else being in it. I don't even think it would have been a match people would have watched flat out. But also, we don't just want to shout out WWE. I want to shout out
no, shout out everybody.
I want to give some TNA some love, because they allowed two women to kind of just do something in a way that you weren't seeing. What we were saying that we wanted to see in WWE, TNA at the time was doing it. And you had that girl, Gail Kim, who we just recently interviewed not too long ago.
Yes, sir.
Against that one and only Awesome Kong. And they had some battles, and they were setting the standard for women's wrestling outside of WWE, which was actually getting more attention than anything else, because it's like, wow, at least one company seems to kind of understand how to use their women a little different than what WWE was. And even though you can say, not to say that TNA didn't have former people from WWE or whatever, but this was also at a time where Vince had bought out WCW. There's a lot of people he had on the contract. There's a lot of people he didn't have on the contract. A lot of people got let go. It's the wrestling business, man. The wrestling business is a cut and paste industry. Okay, people go from one company to another. There's no such thing as loyalty to one company. You people have jumped. All right, Vince don't want everybody, so you got to go somewhere else and wrestle. So but my point being, they figured out a way to utilize the women differently, but still keep the sex appeal, because you had people like the beautiful people, and and those were some irritating bitches. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say that, but man, they were good at what they did, because they they played up the part. They delivered on what they were. It took them a few years once they got their competition up, once they got more women involved. that when you know they built themselves up and they became a respectable division, the
Right,
knockouts
right,
division.
right.
No, they definitely put their foot forth in what they were doing in a lot of women. I mean, come on, man, how many beer guzzling women can bake a beer can with her titty? I mean, ODB was like one of the.
ODB was it,
I mean,
baby.
man, ODB was something else, man.
Bro.
Bro, I mean, this chick was wild. She was wild, but hey, but she was perfect for them, man. Because
Mm-hmm.
Vince would never let her be that wild on
Yeah.
TV. Maybe Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman might have let that roll on ECW, but
Right, right, right.
and you gotta give ECW certain props. But you gotta give it certain props.
Paulie dangerously.
Right. But I definitely want to give Impact because their women's division was definitely a
Yeah.
standout as far as wrestling, and that's where we got a lot of the newer women coming up. And then it just went and it just took off from there. Honestly, even when TNA were having their kind of rough patch of
Mm-hmm.
man, are they how much longer can they last? The women's the knockout division was still steady kind of being that one good thing that they had. So even till now where it's even tenfold over because you got women like Jordan Grace and you got well you got of course you got Mickey James who's now your Impact Women's Champion. So you still have veterans and young talent there that's helping that grow and be better. So definitely like seeing that. And then our girl Mercedes Monet, she done left the States. She didn't went over to Japan. She's over there winning championships and making challengers and kicking ass and
Mm-hmm.
looking good doing it. So, we love seeing her on the international side doing her damn thing. I know that's your girl. I know you gonna freak out. I know you not gonna end the show not talking about her. So I figure how the hell we go this long and you ain't talked about her. I know you mentioned her name, but normally you just go into a whole spiel. But I wanted to give you some time. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
to at least talk on your girl and what she's been doing before we get out of here because we got to get ready to give these folks that WrestleMania predictions for night 1 and night 2.
No, 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 man. Hey, look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning in. This is a 29-year-old piece of gold. He's your king, too cold. And Mercedes Monet, I'm going to end it on this note. I love you.